Hi everyone, welcome. You are here because you have received a Busy Brains STEAMkit box, and I'm going to be walking you through all of the activities within the box in case you have any questions or if you'd like to do these activities in conjunction with the videos. So for the very first activity, what you'll be needing is on this tray right here. So I have the pieces of paper that are rolled up, my set of crayons, my Scotch tape in here. I also have some extra, a pair of scissors, and your Busy Brains STEAMkit booklet. So to begin, I'm going to take the rubber band off of this roll, and you'll notice that you have two pieces of paper that look very, very similar but do have some different labels on them. So on the first page, we have the left side of our brain, and on the second page, we have the right side of our brain. And they're labeled the same because there is a right and left section of each of these lobes and portions of our brain. So what we're going to do to begin, my piece of paper is a little bit folded. So I'm just going to weight it down here with my tape and my scissors to begin. And I'm going to open my crayons. And you'll notice that the different lobes and regions of your brain are labeled differently. So you'll see the occipital lobe, the parietal lobe, your sensory and motor cortex, your frontal lobe, and your temporal lobe, and as well as your cerebellum. So what we're going to do is color each of these in corresponding colors. So I'm going to start with red. I'm going to color in the occipital lobe on my right side red. And you'll notice too that the template has areas right here with some arrows and some lines. Those are for assembling these hats, thinking caps as I like to call them. So I'm just going to color this whole piece red. You don't have to use red, you can choose whatever color you'd like for this first section. Just keep in mind when we begin with the left side, we will want to make sure that the colors are corresponding. So both occipital lobes will be colored in red. Okay, occipital lobe is done. Next, I'm going to move on to our temporal lobe, which I am going to color in green. In your booklet, as you are coloring in different regions of the brain, you will notice on the page of the first activity that it tells you what each region of your brain controls as well. So as you're coloring, if you have any questions on what portions of the brain controls different things, you can refer to this page as well. Okay, finding another color in my pack. I think I'm going to go with blue next for our frontal lobe. And the frontal lobe is quite large on this. Of course, we know our brain and our different lobes and regions of our brain do not actually have different colors. They are all the same color. This just is a great visual for understanding the differentiation in where they exist in our brain. So we don't actually have blue brains. This is just to denote where that specific lobe exists in our brain. All right. Next, I'm going to color our parietal lobe purple. Purple for parietal lobe. Alrighty. Our cerebellum, I'm choosing to color orange. This controls balance and muscle memory. Our sensory cortex, right here, sort of in the middle portion, I'm going to use yellow for that. So sensory relating to our senses, how we feel, hear, interact with the world around us. And lastly, for our motor cortex, I'll do that a light black, so we can still see the words labeled, but it is a different color, so we know the distinction between areas. Perfect. So once this is done, I'm going to repeat the same process with the left side. So since my frontal lobe on the right side is blue, I would color the frontal lobe on the left side blue. Motor cortex would be black, sensory cortex yellow, parietal lobe purple, occipital lobe red, temporal lobe green, and our cerebellum orange. What I'm going to do next is cut these templates out. I would recommend coloring them in before you cut them out. And to cut them out, I'm going to start just around this outer boundary or edge of both of them. So I'm not going to worry about those arrows and triangle pieces that we didn't color in quite yet. All right, I'm going to recycle all of these scraps of paper, so I will set those aside and place them in our recycling here in just a second. Next, we are going to begin assembling our left hemisphere. So to do that, we are going to cut along these lines that are dashed. So you'll notice that there are arrows pointing to a solid line, and the solid line is not the line that we're going to be cutting. So just the line that's dashed where the arrows begin. So not that where the arrows are pointing, where the arrows are beginning, that's where we're going to cut, and we're just going to cut all the way until that section stops. So for example, I'm going to cut all the way to here on that first one, and then just stop when that dotted or dashed line stops. So I'm just making one cut, I'm not making two. Just one along the dashed line, and I'm just going to repeat that all the way across our left hemisphere template. And lastly, one large. Right there. All right, now that that's done, you'll notice that this creates great opportunity for folding. So what we're going to do is fold the piece where the arrow is so that the arrow is completely hidden and it's pretty seamless looking. So you'll just be able to see the areas where there's color, and then we're going to place one piece of tape. You've been given a pack of tape in your kit. I'm using the tape that I had on hand just because it's already opened. And so I'm just going to repeat this throughout our template. And you'll notice as we do this, it's beginning to give our left hemisphere some height. Almost like a bowl. It's beginning to look very three-dimensional. You might need a few pieces of tape just because this template was printed on cardstock, which is a little thicker, so feel free to use more pieces of tape if you're noticing that it needs it. little stubborn. Might also be helpful to wrap pieces of tape around into the inside as well if there are some areas that are just not wanting to stick and hold together. When you're done with your left hemisphere, it will look something like this. Like I said, it now has some dimension to it. We are going to repeat the same process with our left side. All right, now that we are done with both of our left and our right hemisphere, we should have two almost look sort of like bowls hemispheres, as well as these two cerebellums. So next we're going to tape our cerebellums just under our occipital lobe. You'll notice there's a white edge right here. You can put a piece of tape on that edge just so it doesn't show. Maybe put sticky side out and tape it right below your occipital lobe, like so, and repeat on both sides. So I'm going to do sticky side facing towards me on the tape, and then tape it like that. Next, what we're going to do is we are going to tape our hemispheres together along the top of our hat. What we want here is for all of the lobes to align. So all the colors should be matching up. So for example, our purple parietal lobe on our right hemisphere is right next to our purple parietal lobe on our left hemisphere. So we are going to tape these together. You might need help from a partner, an adult, whoever you're working through this kit with just for this part, because sometimes it does require two sets of hands. Let's see here. Start that. Put some tape across the top. Fold it out. All right, when you are done, this is what your Build-A-Brain activity number 1 for our Busy Brain kit will look like. So we'll notice that the frontal lobe, mine is blue, will be in the front part of our heads, and the occipital lobe, as well as our cerebellum, which in my case are red and orange, will be in the back part of our heads. These are meant to fit children. They're a little bit too small for me, otherwise I would try mine on and show you, but, oh, never mind, these fit adults. I'm wearing my hat just as a visual representation of where each region of your brain is, where your left hemisphere is, where your right hemisphere is, and all of that. As I said in our booklet, it explains the different parts of your brain, the different lobes, and what they control. So as a refresher, we'll just go over that together. Our frontal lobe in the front part of our hat controls emotions. It is our emotional control center, personality, and decision making. The parietal lobe is sensation and perception. The occipital lobe, visuospatial processing, depth perception, face recognition, and memory formation. the temporal lobe, long-term memory, visual and auditory processing, and language recognition. Our motor cortex is movement, and our sensory cortex is sensory information, like all of our 5 senses. There are 2 graphics down here as well of the different regions in our brain. In real life, we don't have a green region of our brain. That's just to differentiate where that lobe is, what space it takes up. We know that our brain is not actually green. All right, for our second activity, you have some nerve. We're going to be making a replica of a neuron. So we'll be needing our beads, some scissors from home, and our pipe cleaners. I also have my booklet here just for reference. So to begin, I'm going to use one of my pipe cleaners and cut 3 shorter pieces from this pipe cleaner. If this is challenging, ask an adult or whoever you're working on the kit for some help. I think that should be good. I'm going to place my shorter pipe cleaners to the side, and I'm now going to use a longer pipe cleaner that hasn't been cut, and I'm going to pick an end and roll it or curl it on one end a couple times. It'll almost resemble a lollipop. This curled portion of our pipe cleaner is going to resemble the cell body of our neuron. There's a sort of a map, or a diagram rather. There's a diagram of a neuron in our booklet for reference of different pieces of the neuron, as well as what they control and what they do. So now that I have that rolled up as our cell body, I'm going to add a few beads. You can use all of them onto our pipe cleaner right here. And I'll add all of these beads onto mine. These represent the myelin sheath. Again, if you have any questions on what myelin sheath is, please look into your booklet and feel free to read more about that as well. This model of a neuron is not to scale. They're much smaller than this, and it is estimated that the human brain, once fully developed, has 86 billion neurons. So if they were this large, there would not be room for all of them in our body. Now that all of my myelin sheath and these beads have been placed onto the pipe cleaner, I'm going to set this cup aside. They are recyclable, so please recycle them. And I'm going to loop this around on one end just to hold the beads from falling off. I'm just going to wrap it so I don't have to cut any more of my pipe cleaner. So this is what I have so far. With my smaller pieces of my pipe cleaner, I'm going to add a few of them to the cell body here, and I'm just putting them under where I have twisted. And I'm folding them in a V shape. I might even twist them just to ensure that they stay in place. And those are going to be dendrites. So I'll add 2 dendrites to our cell body. Again, just folding it under the cell body and then twisting so it stays in place. That's what those look like. And I'm gonna add, I'll cut this piece smaller. I'm going to add some terminal branches on the opposite end of our neuron. Please feel free to reference the vocabulary of what each of these components are. And under the Make a Connection piece in your booklet, section in your booklet, it tells you about how connections travel through each neuron. And there you have it. If we look here, we can also compare it to this model of a neuron as well. So you'll notice that we have our cell body, this round area. The dendrites are sticking out like little branches. The nucleus would be in the middle of this cell body here. The myelin sheath are all of these yellow beads. And finally, we have our terminal branches over here. For our third activity, we're going to be making a salt circuit that illustrates how electricity travels, much like how electricity in our brain travels. And what we'll be needing are 2 pieces of paper, which I have right here, 1, 2, a 2-ounce container of glue, a 2-ounce container of salt. We have some LEDs and paper clips in this small bag, so you'll be needing that bag, as well as the bag of batteries, electrical tape, and your food coloring. It's great to do this over a tray or a baking sheet as well, so I have my black tray here just because we're using salt and we want to contain that. So feel free to grab a tray from home or a baking sheet or even just a piece of newspaper to contain all of the salt. So I'm going to begin by removing a couple of things from these bags and placing them on my tray. These paper clips. All right, now that my workstation is all set up, we are going to begin by folding each piece of paper in half. And they're perfect square, so whichever way you fold them, it's just fine. Alright, so we have folded both pieces of paper in half. I've placed paper clips on the end of both pieces of paper and they are directly next to each other on my tray. Next, we're going to use our glue from this cup and pour a line of glue from the paper clip all the way up to the edge of the paper. You can be generous with the glue, just make sure that you repeat it on both sheet of paper so you don't want to dump it all in one spot. Next, we are going to sprinkle salt directly on top of this glue and make sure you're sprinkling on top of the glue just so the salt has a place to stick. All right, with our extra salt, we're just gonna shake it off carefully. We want all of the salt to be on the glue. So we're just shaking off the excess onto this tray. That's what we have so far. Next, we're going to use our food coloring. My kit came with blue, yours might have a different color. And we're going to add some food coloring on top of the salt. The salt will absorb it and it will just be a fun color. All right, now that my food coloring is done, we are going to use our battery pack. So our first step is to insert the batteries into the battery pack. So you have 2 AA batteries here. We're going to insert them into this battery pack. Make sure you're asking an adult for help if you need it. All right, and you'll notice that you have a red wire on your battery pack and a black wire on your battery pack. That is very important for our next step. All right, so now that we have layered a generous line of glue up to the top of our paper, sprinkled it with salt, and added the food coloring, next I have taken my battery pack here, placed the batteries in it, and you'll notice there is a small section on each black and red wire that is exposed, meaning there's wire without that covering on it. That's the portion that we want tucked under our paper clip. If you need electrical tape to secure that, if it's not stable enough, feel free to unroll some of this electrical tape that you've been given and just tape those 2 items together. Next, I'm going to locate my LED, and you will notice that there are 2 different legs to LEDs, one slightly longer than the other, and the other is slightly shorter. So we're just going to gently, without breaking them, pull these legs apart, remembering which one is longer and which one is shorter before we pull them apart. That's important. And then we are going to take the longer leg and place it directly into the glue and salt mixture of the red wire piece of paper. So if you need to separate your pieces of paper slightly to remember which side is which, that's a great idea as well. And then we're going to take the leg that's slightly shorter and place it in the glue and salt of the black wire. As we do this, you should notice the light in your LED light up. So feel free to experiment with this. Try your other color of LED if you would like. Make sure that the long leg of the LED is on with the red wire and the short leg of the LED is on the black wire. All right, for our very last activity in this kit, you may have read already in your booklet, if you're reading it cover to cover, that one of the tips to keep our brains healthy is to continuously challenge ourselves. So you have been given a bag with a tangram puzzle and a template on which you will build the puzzle. Also, fun fact, all 5 of these tans, or the pieces of the tangram puzzle, have been printed in-house on our 3D printers here at the Montana Science Center. They're non-toxic and made of a plant-based plastic. All right, so we have 5 different tans, or pieces of this puzzle, and skip ahead if you don't want to see how this puzzle is solved, because we are going to solve it. I'm going to start with one square, or I guess the only perfect square of the tans, in a top corner. This piece that almost looks like a house with a roof, I'm going to place diagonally on the other corner. The right size. All right, so I have my square in the top corner, the piece that almost looks like a cartoon or drawing of a house in the bottom corner with the triangle pointing into the corner. I have this large triangle in the upper right corner. Next, I have this piece that I'm going to place like so. And when we're done with this puzzle, it should be a perfect square. So all of the pieces should fit together within the square. Here's our last triangle. And there you have it. That is our tangram square puzzle to challenge our brains. All right, if you enjoyed participating in this kit today, please feel free to tag us on your social media accounts. We have our Instagram and our Facebook handles written right here. This kit was sponsored and funded by Bozeman Health and also supported by Town and Country Foods and EcoMontana. Thanks for joining us, and we will catch you on our next video.